Hello and warm welcome to Straight from the Heart, a podcast by Pragyan Advisory. I'm Vivek Tiwari, your host. In last several months, we've realized the importance of having focused, deep conversations, and that's the reason this series of interactions with business leaders we have termed as conversations. As part of conversations today, we have someone who has served in our defense force, worked with multiple global organizations at senior leadership levels, is also an investor in next generation of Asian American founders. Dear viewers, listeners, please welcome Amit Dubey. Amit, thank you for joining us.
Sure thing. My pleasure, Vivek. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I'm excited about the series that you're starting. I think it'd be valuable to have these conversations. I'm myself looking forward to kind of reflections um, out of this chat. Thanks so much for inviting, and super excited about this.
Thank you, Amit. I know that you're busy, you're wearing multiple hats, so kind of you to take time out and join us. I'll
Sure.
just share with you the overall theme of our discussion today. Uh, for you, we've this interaction we've termed as leading self and global teams. So by and large, the background would be leading self and global teams. And what I will do is, considering your background, I will straight away jump into the first question. And I think our viewers and listeners would be eager to hear your views on that. So we know that you served in the Indian Army and then been a part of some of the, I would call, extremely renowned global organizations. So maybe tell us a little bit about your own journey. How did some of the life experiences and these organizations shaped your leadership character?
Thanks, Vivek. Starting off on such a reflective and probably a deep question. So I will probably go on uh, I'll have a long drawn answer. So hopefully you don't mind that
No,
because yeah. So um, I think there are. So I was kind of making mental note of some of these career journeys. While now it looks, if I look back, it looks like it's sort of I had planned, but of course I had not planned anything. In fact, I did have a very linear career plan that I'll join the military, serve the country, and then potentially, if I get to live through all of that, retire with my mates and live in Dehradun. It's the northern part of India, and sort of just live there and just like old military officers, catch up over the evening, talk
yeah.
about the tales of the military, and sort of call it a day. So that was the life plan per se. But but of course, life hasn't turned out at all like that. It's been lots of ups and downs, but I'd probably take you down to like how it all started. Actually, I was born in eastern part of UP, close to Nepal border, in a farmer's family. My dad was a farmer, and so first few years enjoyed my farm life, and we lost our dad very early. So my mom made a decision from that village that she would have us raised by her brother, who was a soldier in the Indian military. So that's how my sort of introduction to military happened. Both me and my brother were raised by our uncle. So huge amount of gratitude to him. And we sort of lived with him and his family all across India. I moved around quite a lot. I actually changed 7 schools, which as a kid I didn't like that much, but I think it has played a huge role in sort of the kind of person I am and sort of my love for travel and my love for meeting and being part of different cultures. And from seeing my uncle, actually early days living in a military camp, the army life fascinated, and especially he was a soldier, so like a military officer's life specifically was very fascinating. And so as a kid, it was, I still have, in fact, in my introductions, I show this picture where even in birthday parties, I'd be saluting and my mom would be cheesed off saying, this is not a Republic Day parade. Like, why are you doing this? And like, she'd be generally miffed in those photographs that, so stupid. But like really fascinated. But as I grew older and my teenage years, I remember my uncle introduced me to one of his military colonels, and that colonel actually told me, "Son, I hear you want to join the military." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "But have you thought about this? That you'll have to give everything and you'll not get anything in return." That was a deep and very reflective statement.
Mm.
Because I had only thought about all the glamorous stuff about the military, but like he told me what the life is all about. And that sort of made me sort of self-reflect and think about what it is that is this the kind of life and career I would want, that I'll dedicate everything towards a cause, and I can't expect anything in return, which, again, sounds very cliched, but it's sort of after reflection, after time, I felt that's a great way to spend life. That you dedicate your life towards a cause which is of service, and I felt that was a fantastic way to spend my life. So that's where my sort of zeal to join the armed forces became even stronger. I was like, this is it. This is my life. This is my life's calling. This is what I want to do. And so I did end up joining the military as a civil engineering officer and served for about 5 years. But then, and of course, I had a plan that I'd go on to become a military general. I was inspired by Field Marshal Manekshaw. And he was such an amazing leader. So I was like, okay, this is it. My life is set. My next, 30, 40, 50 years are defined. I was on that journey, but then had a medical condition. I got actually diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia, which was a huge sort of turning point in my kind of personal and professional life. And there was a time that I actually then took a retirement because I didn't know how long I have, because some doctor said you live 6 months, 1 year, and it's been 16 years now that I've been in remission. And of course, like for anyone, these are a event like this can kind of really change your mindset, and it did. It has, first of all, I think a huge amount of gratitude that the military provided for all the medical support that I needed. And from there on, a huge amount of gratitude also to this sort of a concept that I came across, which was that during my kind of cancer survivor journey, I actually insisted that I only want to meet survivors because that gave me hope. And that is something that now I'm extremely passionate about, that I try and build communities of survivors who can speak with people who are going through similar journeys. I think that sort of, you asked the question, like, what's the leadership sort of character that is built? That has a huge impact on me, and then I share with others that in any crisis, if you're able to find people who've successfully navigated that crisis, meet them, talk to them, visualize what success would look like, and then even if it's a long journey, it definitely helps. So that sort of is my general approach towards handling any type of crisis. We are in a sort of a crisis right now. It's been a year and a half since Corona started, and as I deal with my own sort of challenges, or as I speak to teams or founders or people dealing with their own challenges, I definitely kind of try and dip into this experience of mine, which was about handling a crisis at a personal and professional level, and sort of think about the long term. And I at that time had built this idea that I want to take one day at a time and then be optimistic for the future. I later on realized there is a concept called Stockdale paradox, and we can go deeper into that, and which is basically James Stockdale was a U.S. naval commander. He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam in the 60s, and him and his wife have written this beautiful book called In Love and War, which is all about how he survived the POW camp. And how his family kind of supported him. And he basically says that for any crisis, if you are realist in the short term and a optimist in the long run, that's where you survive. Because when he was asked who were the first ones to die in the POW camp, he said the optimists,
Hmm.
because the optimists felt that US is the world's biggest, strongest military. We will be out by Christmas or we'll be out by Easter, and they weren't, and their hearts would break. And that's where, so he said optimists are the first one, which is so contradictory. You'd feel that optimists would be would survive. And but I feel that actually it is in the short run you have to be a realist, so you have to solve for whatever challenges come your way. But in the long run, you have to be optimist. So that's probably one sort of leadership character sort of that stayed with me. And then from there on, I pivoted my sort of life because I felt that I needed another sort of reason for living, as well as whatever time I have. And that's where I thought maybe I start my own company, which works with the military, so that I still feel I'm part of the military. And for that, I decided to join Amex, which had survived over 150 years and done so well. Started as a freight forwarding company, and it's a financial institution, such a big one at that, and spent about a decade there doing various roles across ops, strategy planning, some roles in finance, sales, and marketing, etc. And all of that exposure actually, and the reason I moved around was again to gather a lot of experiences. And from there, I spent a couple of years at Uber, which is again an absolutely fantastic company, has such a grand vision. And then from there to Airbnb, which is where sort of I felt that my personal values and that of the company of helping people belong anywhere sort of resonated very well. And probably another similarity that I saw was compared to the military here, like a vast majority of people that I spoke with while I was meeting folks is that the alignment to the mission is fantastic. Like no matter who you ask, like if you ask somebody in the military, why are you here? Everybody will say, well, I'm here to serve the country. As cliche as it sounds, at Airbnb, I felt that alignment to the mission as well, that people are there to help people belong anywhere. So that was that. So yeah, that's been sort of my absolutely not a linear career and life journey, which I had thought and planned, and I think that's the lesson as well, that you might plan something, but life will not go according to that plan, and you have to adjust and adapt. And again, be a realist for the short run, be an optimist for the long run, sort of keep moving forward. And another area that if I may touch upon, Vivek, would be that, which has been sort of a big focus area, and I think it has resonated with my leadership style as well, has been that very early on, I saw my uncle talk about military officers. So, and that had an influence on me. What type of military officer do I want to be? Or what type of leader I want to be? And I had seen this, that, for him, he would get so excited if a military officer or his officer listened to his idea, listened to his point of view. And he would get so disturbed if they did. And it mattered to him so much. And as a kid and as a teenager, I was like, what's the big deal if somebody heard your point of view or it didn't? And like Indian parents never heard my point of view. So I was like, what's the big deal in this? Like, what? You don't hear my point of view. Why are you getting so disturbed? But as I sort of grew older, and of course I could reason, and I did see my guardians or my parents and listening to my point of view as well, I realized it is an innate human need to be heard, to be listened to, right? To be, even if you kind of agree or disagree, but you hear, that's a respectful environment. And that sort of has stayed with me, that if I become an officer, and then as I did my research, I also realized the leaders who listened, or the military leaders or military officers who listened to their troops, did very well in personally and professionally. And I was like, so this is a very easy thing to do. And then your people are much strong. They'll do anything for you, even otherwise, but they'll be doing it because there's a term that Sahib said so. And they do it because they know that, that your leader would also stand for you and sort of listen to your point of view. And that has been sort of that wherever I've gone across in the corporate world, I have tried to find the secret sauce of inclusion, like what, because I feel, well, diversity is extremely important. You should focus on it, but I still feel it's easier of the two, and inclusion is I'd say probably the most difficult problem to solve, and not only by words but by action. So and maybe we go kind of later in the chat, we kind of talk about some of my experiments with this concept, but that is something that probably where, like, the thread which ties my leadership journey probably would be that trying to build processes which help inclusion. So those are a couple of things which stand out. But thanks so much for patiently listening. And I did say that it was going to be a long drawn, full of drama. That's what my life has been, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I found it, it's been very exciting.
No, I think even I mean, it was a wonderful way of narrating it, and few things emerged. I think from the very beginning, this part of suddenly being exposed to a certain kind of adversity, early life or at a later stage, where sort of things got settled and you were in the army, and then suddenly, I think influence of people who had a certain view and vision towards life and purpose, whether it was your uncle or at a later stage, many other people right now. So for our viewers and listeners, I would just want to say this, that currently right now Amit is the chairperson of the board, Airbnb GCC, and you can, for the ones who would see the video, would see that the Airbnb logo is there while he's talking to me in the background. So I think that's one part. I think what I really liked was the way you described the realist and the optimist part, and I think it works well in every scenario, specifically even now when we are talking to a lot of leaders. I think this beautiful balance of being a realist now and being an optimist in the future is a beautiful way of looking at it. I am also reminded of one of the most beautiful books that I read, and because you talked about prisoners of war and army and all of that, I reminded of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search of Meaning. I think purpose was the other thing, and I think that's also somewhere came across as you were talking, that at a particular point, the very strong purpose you identified of serving the nation, and what a beautiful purpose it is, that you have to give everything and you don't ask much in return. So I think those crucibles of leadership, I'm sure, really helped you at various stages of life, and thank you very much for sharing it. I was listening intently, and I also sort of an imagery got created. When I look at you now, I still see you in the haircut which typically I saw when I'm from Dehradun. I've done my schooling from Dehradun.
Brilliant.
So used to eagerly watch the cadets, on particular days, I think Sundays, on a bicycle.
We used to go on our the weekly time off that we'd get, and near the clock tower or the Ghantaghar.
That's correct. Clock tower.
The bakery, the which was Ellora, or what was the name of the
Ellora's. That's the bakery.
It was favorite hangout place.
Stick Joe's used to be there. Wow,
fantastic memories, man. I didn't know that, but that's basically, if you're from Dehradun, like most of the military, a lot of military officers actually retire there. It's a beautiful place, and it's like, if like I still have the picture in my head, like how would my once everything all said and done, how would my last few years of my life would look like? And that's the image. It's small cottage, surrounded by my military friends, having a drink, and looking at the sunset and reminiscing the life we've had. That was the plan, and maybe I still do it, and maybe have my military and some corporate friends in there, right? It'd be fantastic.
Fantastic, lovely. And I think it was amazing way of narrating your life, and life, of course, has been interesting, challenging, and you've been able to accomplish so much at this point in time. So thank you for sharing that. I think this will pretty good for our viewers and listeners. I'll move to the next one now, and I'll shift a little bit of gear. I'll talk about, I'll ask you about, you talked about the companies that you worked for. So one of them is, a global, I would say, financial services organization. I think more than 170 years old now,
Yeah.
American Express.
Yeah.
The other one is, a big global startups, and if I can say startups,
Yeah, of
both
course.
of them, Uber
Yeah.
and Airbnb,
Yeah.
right? Then there is Indian Army,
Yeah.
where you've served. So tell me, is there any similarity, if there is at all, in all these three, four institutions or organizations that you've been a part of? So what's similar? What's different? And in day-to-day life, how does it play out? What does it mean? We can still relate to an officer in Indian Army, because I've been in Dehradun.
Yeah.
We've seen them in the movies,
Yep.
though at times there's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But I would like to understand, the second part is, what does it mean from a day-to-day perspective, both in Indian Army and then Amex and then Uber and then Airbnb? So yeah, your view. Any similarities? What's the similar? What's different? And how does it play out in day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think, again, a very, very deep question. So I'd probably touch upon few areas which have resonated with me. One is, if you see both the armed forces, like Indian Army, it was built in 1895, of course, in a different context, but like it's again, 130-year-old plus sort of organization. Amex was started on 1850, and it's still there and sort of doing well. And then the Uber and Airbnb was built around a similar time frame of 2007-8. And all these, I think the former ones as an organization, their mission was very clear. And I think it's phenomenal that if you clear in your mission, like what will you do can sort of move around. But if your why is very clear, you can survive century, which is a phenomenal, I'd say, thing. That's what both Uber and now Airbnb, that's our sort of our founders talk about it, that one of the things we would love to see if this concept of belonging can survive the century. And because again, all of us who are pouring our heart and soul into this company and this brand and this mission, we would love to see this outlive us. And Brian says it beautifully, that like it's like when you're raising a child, you'd want your child to kind of outlive you. That's a sort of, if any founder is able to do that, I think that's such a satisfactory sort of thing, that you built something which lasted long. And probably the similarity, I'd say, is if the why of what you're doing is clear, both at an organization as well as an individual level, the more clarity you have in that, I'd say, the more everlasting business, career, life that you can actually build. So spending time on that why is super important as an entity. Both, again, individual as well as a kind of corporate or whatever other forms of entity you have. The other part that I'd seen is, again, a commonality is that good leadership is needed everywhere. And probably many things stay sort of constant, but one of the things that probably something that I see sort of applicable to all these businesses is, what is a leader's role? And I'd say, and I'm sure you'd remember Vivek Chenault used to talk about this, the leader's job is to define reality and give hope.
That's Napoleon, and he was quite influenced by Napoleon. So yeah, I remember that very distinctly.
And that again has stayed, because that was something that in different ways was taught to us in the military as well, that we have to kind of define reality. And Napoleon was a military general, so it's sort of a lot of things in the corporate world actually come from the military. The word strategy itself. So that, to me, like, no matter where you are as a leader, you have to kind of do that. And I think, leadership is a vast subject. It's a complex topic, and even if you Google, you'll find hundreds and
Thousands and
thousands of
lakhs and millions, and I don't know how many books written and articles written.
written
Yeah,
articles. Yeah,
yeah.
so very tough, and I'm a student. I'm a humble student, so I'll not try. And in fact, all of this that I'm sharing, probably maybe a caveat is I'm still a student, and this is my limited perspective of what I have lived and seen. And maybe the other part that I sort of really loved and saw that leadership is a choice, and anybody can make that choice. It's not title, it's not levels, it's not if you have people sort of under you, that's only when you are a leader. It's a choice. It's a choice that you make, and it's I'd probably say it's a choice to serve. If you're in the military, it's a choice to serve. That's why, like, our motto of country first, are men that we lead and their families, and then if anything is left, is that's where I'll prioritize myself. So, like, self is always last, and if you have that mindset, and of course there are again various sort of ways of doing this. I think in the corporate world, I heard it called being servant leadership. But I agree with that sort of mindset that leadership is a choice, and it's a choice to serve. And if you make that choice anywhere, you tend to do well. And those are some of the similarities. Of course, different context, different etc. But there are these common threads that I could find in all these institutions.
Lovely. And as you rightly pointed out in the beginning, two of them have survived 130 years, 170 years. So it tells you that there is something very phenomenal at the substratum level which holds it together. And then two of them, I think they started off 2007-8, created a global impact, and still there are some commonalities that we can see. And I'm pretty sure that if the fundamentals are strong, you are able to face a lot of storms. Like in my case, when I was with Amazon, we heard Jeff say that the .com impact was huge to most of the companies, including Amazon. But their long-term thinking and vision was his vision was so clear that I think Amazon managed not only to survive, then the growth is also phenomenal. So couldn't have agreed more.
Yeah, and I have a personal story, and in fact, my personal hero, because I was asked this question, like, who's your hero? And that my mom is my personal hero, and specifically, I ask her some of these questions because she's a fantastic kind of example of how do you think long term. For her to live in a village, and it's a backward area, and to be in that environment and have this vision that I want, even if I don't have my husband, I'd want my kids to have a good education so that they can do whatever they want to do in life. And so for a mother to sacrifice and send her only two kids to stay with her brother, and for many years not be with them and live in a sort of life that she lived in a village, and sort of waited for almost 2 decades to see fruit of her sacrifice. Correct. And I think my question to her was, how did you know? How did you know that after 2 decades your sons will not be useless, and that they will go away and not take care of you, etc. But you made such a personal sacrifice. And she said, if you want something better, you have to then go after that with full focus and sort of not let sort of short-term issues have you deviate from that. And like that's sort of, and what a compounding sort of impact it has had on our lives. And like now when she's with us, and she lives in a metropolitan area and has a fairly good life. But it reminds, like, it is phenomenal that, like, almost now 30 plus years ago, she made that choice that if I sacrifice for 2 decades, then I'll have a good life, which was again like a phenomenal story of and that's why she's my personal hero. And I reflect on her, like all that I've achieved is because of, I'd say, having her in my life and kind of guiding me for through all this crisis. Yeah.
And also I see embedded in that question is, do we have clear, concrete data for everything?
Yeah.
Or at times, perhaps we don't have,
Yeah.
but there's a very strong belief, and that belief, we have to at times trust, and it motivates and it guides us, it energizes us.
Yeah.
So if you look for that kind of data, that my sons will take care of me, they will not go wild, this, that, there can't be data for that.
Yeah.
There has to be a strong belief.
Yeah.
And I think leaders also need to learn at certain levels that that there's time for data, and it's important, and you have to look for it from various angles, and at times you also have to have certain kind of belief.
Yeah.
That's
why Jeff Bezos' example is so phenomenal, that in 95 he said internet is going to be a big thing. And while of course they IPO'd, but then the dot-com crash in the 97 and then 2003, but they kept building, and it's now, of course, it's one of the richest men in the world, and people say, oh wow, he's so successful, he's so lucky. But like, people have to go and look back in 1995 where he had this belief. Again, like, he's seen the fruits of the labor 20 years down the road, but he still stuck to that idea and sort of thought. And many of these successes, like even at Airbnb, our founders in 2007-8 was one of the toughest times with the financial crisis. And they thought of this idea of strangers staying in somebody's homes. And of course, many of them, and like storied sort of history or past that, where people have shared that nobody believed in their idea, but they did. And of course, some did in their idea, and that's how it sort of flourished. But they stuck to it for over a decade and sort of went through various ups and downs. So again, but if somebody would have asked them, will this survive 10 years? Like you can't answer that.
It's a powerful one. What I'll do is I'll maybe move to the next one, which is more around, I would say, teams. And because you've been now leading global teams for quite some time now, and you've built them, you've scaled them, you've created value for the organization. So I'll ask you this question. Based on your experience, what's some of the high points, big challenges in building and leading global teams, especially in a dynamic environment? Because, I know people say there's a lot of VUCA world and volatility, but there are some businesses, typically product technology businesses, especially like yours, there's certain order of dynamism which gets kind of multiplied. Pandemic is a great example of that. So and also, what are some of the indicators that tells you when you are building a team and they are moving in a certain stage, that this is showing me signs of 1 + 1 = 2 kind of a team, and this is showing me sign of 1 + 1 = 11 kind of a team? So what are those indicators? And I'm asking you both as a leader and as an investor. So your views.
It's a great question, and I probably reflect back on my previous point about how some of these organizations that I was part of have survived century and sort of have lived beyond the century, and the why for them was very clear. And I think it's an idea which is transferable to individual, to team, to institution, or a company, or an entity. It can be applied across. So the why, again, my personal opinion, if the why is clear for any individual, any team, any organization, that's where leaders or companies, that's why they need to invest a lot amount of time. If your why is clear, then I think you're able to survive and sort of stay on to your belief. Because of course, even if your why is clear, there will be ups and downs and challenges where you will be challenged that is this the right why? But if you still stick to it, and many of the stories that we talked about, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Brian Chesky, like, they stuck to their why, and their ideology. And of course, the how is the part which you need to be adaptable. You have to, you have to adapt to the environment or to the situation. But if you're clear on your why, then you're able to do that. And again, because I strongly sort of associate with this mindset, that's why like when I build a team myself or see high performing teams, the alignment towards the why is when I see that is very high, the team tends to do much better as compared to teams where alignment is not that high. It's like when you think of the only picture in my head is those magnets where the alignment, if a magnet is aligned to a let's say iron, like all the atoms are pointing towards or I don't know,
the nails reorient.
And they all point towards one direction, right?
Particular pole.
Particular pole, absolutely. So that alignment, and of course there will be some misalignments, but a vast majority, if they're aligned towards that, that's the right thing to happen. But again, it's easier said than done. I would say because of something like this, the amount of focus and effort that one has to put towards first defining that why, and then finding people who also believe in that why and are also invested in that why for the long run. That is, of course, a challenge. But like to your point of, I have seen that if your why is strong, the volatility that exists, because your why is so strong, the volatility, you can survive any type of volatility, because bumps and bruises on the way, it's going to happen for sure. There is no idea which like just runs through. And I love this. I think it was somebody said this about Lionel Messi, that it took him 17 years, 8 months, 4 days, and a few hours to become an overnight star. Like people think he was born with it, and nobody's born with it. It's you work towards it for a long period of time, and then of course luck plays a massive role. But nobody's an overnight star. It takes decades of practice and sort of doing that. So, but if your why is strong, then you can be that you can achieve the greatness that you aspire for. Many legends. Like I'm interested in fact, like seeing even people in individual sport like Serena Williams and what she's done. And in fact, even post her maternity, how dedicated and focused she is towards sort of building a long-lasting legacy. Again, if you see, people feel that she's so good, but if you kind of look back, the amount of investment she has done in her career and her life, it boils down to when she was a kid, and from there she's kind of invested many decades to reach where she has. But again, even at that time, her wanting to become world's best in tennis was the why. I'm sure she's faced many challenges, but yet she is where she is, one of the greatest athlete ever. And it's primarily because of the alignment to the why.
So I saw two things. One is the alignment to the why, which is not an easy one, but it's pretty critical. And second is the consistent efforts in a very focused and disciplined manner that you put in with respect to that why or that purpose. And I think if you see those two things in a team as a collective unit, you're able to. Now, I am sort of now distilling it, if that's what it is. If you see these two indicators, then possibly this is a 1 + 1 = 11 kind of.
Yes, that's absolutely. And I've seen that in a military context, in a old company context, in a young company context. Because any institution is nothing but a sort of a bunch of people working together. Otherwise, it's actually everything is a bunch of people sort of working together. And if they are invested in it, and if you have the right leaders who are able to, get the right people on board, and then inspire the whole team towards that why, and sort of when people are their own individual whys are also aligned with the why of the larger cause. Like if you find that alignment, then that's the team that I've seen. I personally also I've been part of those teams, and I've seen those teams achieve phenomenal results.
Okay, and I think those 2 points, when we narrate it to someone, it immediately clicks if the person has been a part of a great team.
Yeah.
And has also been in the role of building a great team. I think so. I can connect with that, and I think many of our listeners and viewers would also be able to connect to this. So,
yeah.
Thank you. I'll come to the last question
Sure.
of this particular interaction or conversation, as we say it, of ours.
Yeah.
As a leader who's managing global teams, as an investor, as a chairperson of the board for Airbnb GCC, in your view, what are the qualities or attributes that make someone a high potential, I would say, a leader or a founder, who can be relied to create sustainable long-term value and not an overnight, short-term miracle? So, we'd be happy to hear from you. And what are those qualities that you see in a high potential professional leader, founder, that you think that in a particular context, in a founder, it can be an organization.
Yeah.
In a leader, you can be, building up a team, a department or something.
Yeah.
This person is there for sustainable long-term value, and this one is like a short-term miracle kind of.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate?
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe there are people who want short-term sort of benefits. I invest $1 and it becomes 500 tomorrow. And some early stage, for example, like crypto comes to my mind, where there are some people who have gotten into it just because of like overnight I'll become rich. And I think there have been case studies after case studies after case studies, or sort of history is a great reminder. No matter how much you feel that, oh no, this time it's different, but actually, it's been done before. It's a different context, but things have repeated themselves, and there is no shortcut to success. And of course, now success can be very contextual, but for the long run, if you look at something as successful for the long run, it takes a lot of time to build sustainable success. And for that, you have to invest and have a sort of long-term mindset towards becoming successful. So that is.
And I'm asking you this question. Sorry for interrupting. Essentially, because you are dealing with some of the most smartest of the people, and smart people also have a good gift of gab. Combined with intellect, they can also, they can present. They know what the other person, wants to hear. But the beauty is in sort of differentiating that. Here is one who's sort of the short-termish success. Here's somebody who is the long, sustainable long-term value creation kind of a person.
Yeah. And maybe there are people in there, wherever they are, they're okay with either camps, because like I personally wouldn't say that this camp is right versus that camp, but like I'd probably put myself in the category that I heavily believed in compounding, as many leaders, Warren Buffett himself said, the eighth miracle is or eighth wonder of the world is probably compounding, and in fact, but I even scientifically, that all of us have evolved as humans from a hydrogen atom. Is a phenomenal story of compounding, that for billions of years a hydrogen atom with reactions, and it became sort of whatever planets, and from planets to everything that we have on the planet, like single-celled organisms to now sort of human beings. So it is the power of compounding. It's it's something over a long period of time. It sort of gives. So because of this, the reason being grounded in science and facts and experiences, I put myself in this camp that I like to kind of focus on whether it's ideas, whether it's leadership, which is there for the long run. And even whether it's in a kind of an old company, new startup, or a new team that is being built, if you are on this sort of this thought process of about long-term value creation, then if you ask the right questions and you also tell who you are, this is what you believe in, that, like, for example, then you also get leaders who sort of believe in this, or people who believe in this. And also, like, for example, the startups you invest in or the startups you advise, they also know that, oh, if I go to Amit, his brand is long-term thinking. So if I show him overnight success, like you'll get 200% return in 6 months, he will say, I appreciate it, this is brilliant, but not for me. Because I am not from that camp. I personally kind of put myself in this sort of long-term thinking, specifically in organizations, right? Because anybody who's taking some of these bets, if they're not grounded in sort of long-term success of their approach, then as they move on, or they move on to a separate project or a different idea or a different thing, sort of that will fall apart, because it was supposed to be only a short-term thing, and that is something that is critical for me. Like, now, going back to your question on whether it's teams or leaders, I at least ask out of curiosity to understand their why first, and then also talk about, like, what's their long-term sort of thinking, and where do they want to take their idea to, or where they want to take their project to, or thoughts to, etc. And if I would invest, or I would kind of give my time and energy and focus on sort of people who are invested in the long run. I mean, it's like, even when I, for example, mentor people, when they ask me mentorship, like, at times people will come to you, Amit, I want to get promoted. Again, that's a good goal to have, but it's, again, like, grounded in short term. If your long term thing, like, why do you want to get promoted? Like, what's your long term goal? And I know there's been, like, there is a thought of live in the present, think about the next goal, and that's about it. And asking someone what's your 5-year, 10-year goal is a useless question. I again think so contextually it is the right question. Of course, asking people which role, which level do you see yourself in, that's not a good thing. But asking someone what is their, like, a decade plan or thought is a great idea, because at an individual level, and again, these are ideas which can transfer to individual company team, etc. If you have a long-term vision, you're able to then sort of direct your day-to-day towards that long-term. Because if you want to get promoted, why do you want to get promoted? Because you have a long-term vision of doing X, Y. You want to kind of head finance, you want to head sales and marketing. You want to do this because at that level you'll be able to impact the company or the mission in the best way possible. So having that sort of the long-term thinking is, I'd say, I think is sort of critical in any of these scenarios.
I think you answered it. The way you answered it touched my heart, and I also like that part of yours. The way you said that, it's not about one camp is better than the other.
Yeah.
You and I may have a preference for a particular kind of a camp because we believe in we have a certain view of life and value.
Yeah.
For example, you said, and that was a beautiful way of explaining that, how life has evolved. So there's a thing that gets played out.
Yeah.
And perhaps at times when we try to expedite it and try to imagine quick returns, it may work, but it may not work. And the question is, where do we belong? We belong, let's say you and I personally, we belong in an area where we say that, we would go for a long-term value creation.
Yeah. And that's Vivek, if I may touch upon this, that, especially in startups, like, some people feel you have to, like, work crazy hours and crazy thing. Of course, there will be times where you have to kind of invest your energy, but, like, I personally also, one of my mentors, she gave me this advice that, Amit, watch nature. She does everything, she accomplishes everything, and she's never in a hurry. Right? So, and if nature has accomplished so much. So and that's where like whether it's you're in startups or long-term or kind of big companies or small companies, if you have sort of that sort of long-term mindset, then also you are also like, you'll take care of your health, you'll take care of your family, you'll take care of like,
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
everything. You'll take care of your team, you'll not burn them out and sort
Yeah.
of have them leave.
Yeah.
Then you'll be conscious. And that's where like I have fallen more in love with this idea of long-term and sort of thinking about sustainability, because you know, if you rush for something, chances are you make more mistakes. You know, people will not come along that journey, and they will burn bridges and sort of have probably impact on their family, health, and all that stuff. So even from that standpoint, I think it's so important. And I look for like those traits, that is this person holistically thinking about everything, including like how they'll take care of their health, their family. Is everything important to them, and you're able to kind of balance and provide that, because then that tells me that, okay, this is the team or this is the leader who's smart about all these things, because they've thought about these angles as well and are sort of wanting to kind of go on this long journey. So even that, I think, is a especially in today's I don't know, I think it was in certain context somebody said, right, 996 that 9 hours, 9 to 9 6 days a week sort of working. Good if somebody wants to do it, but I feel if you want to do something sustainably over a long period of time, then you have to kind of balance, and you have to balance everything. You have to take care of your personal life, you have to take care of your health, you have to take care of your sort of team long-term goal. And if you have a sort of multi-decade in mind, you also don't rush. You don't. If you are Serena Williams, like when you're playing under 16, you don't think, okay, now tomorrow I'll win the World Cup or win the kind of Olympics gold. It's not possible. You know, you'll go through 16, under 18, then under 21, then so there are stages. You can't skip those stages.
Yeah. Wow, wonderful. You know, I'll share with you, when we started Pragyan, there are few tenets that guides us. I'm sure that they will always guide us. So I think balance, harmony, growth, and integrative growth. I think, you know, those are the things, and that's something that we also mention when we talk to someone who's asking for partnering with us in any kind of solution. We tell them that, you know, these are the principles that we believe in. I'm not saying others who may believe in a different principle, absolutely fine. That's the idea of diversity and inclusion. But we believe in this, and I think somewhere when I'm listening to you, I'm seeing that there's a lot of resonance of what we believe in, even in personal investing. There again, I'm a person who would look for long term. And it's not about, you know, immediately cracking the jackpot.
Absolutely. And that's why you've been my guide and mentor for so long, that I have seeked your counsel for many things, because I truly we resonate on that part, because you come across as a person, as a leader as well, who talks about the long run, talks about sustainability, which is so important. I do want to call out that I have invested in crypto, but a very small portion of my overall wealth, so that I diversify, but not with the intent that I'll become an overnight millionaire. That's not something.
That's not the why. You know, as you were saying, that's not the why. I think that's an important differentiator. So Amit, I think lovely interacting with you after such a long time. We've been trying to chat with each other, and wonderful to know your perspectives around so many things, you know, and especially around leading self and around building global teams. And you know, we wish you all the great luck, success, health, everything. Thank you for taking time out for this conversation. I'm sure our listeners, our viewers will immensely benefit from your perspectives, your viewpoints. Thank you for joining in.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks so much. And these were very thoughtful questions. So I really appreciate you kind of gathering all of that and making me reflect on so many aspects. So I'd say probably the one of the toughest conversations I've had. So hopefully I did justice to that, and it was a lot of fun. I truly appreciate it, and I wish you and the team all the success. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.